Welcome to the Out on a Limb podcast. We are all interconnected to a greater web of consciousness. Our aim is to open your mind to a new world through having open-minded discussions about what we perceive our reality to be.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Out on a Limb podcast with your hosts Will and Allison and Samantha. And we are here with another amazing episode, another amazing guest, Beki Crowell. And I want to share a little bit about her because she is a local Charleston person, as we are. Mm-hmm. And we run in the same circles, but we have not intersected much really at all. And I think now we are going to, because she's really fantastic. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Beki is a soul artist and a vibrational healer known for her bold, colorful paintings that you can see behind her. They're unbelievably gorgeous. They serve as both expressions of beauty and portals for healing and awakening. Through her soul sessions, she intuitively guides clients to align with their divine self using modalities like the Akashic Records, flower essences, Reiki, and light language. She's also the author of Bare Beauty, My Journey of Awakening, which was published in 2018, and Threading of the Soul, Remembering Oneness and the Multidimensional Self in 2024. Welcome, Beki.
Hey.
Thank you so much. It's so lovely to be here with all of you.
Oh, it's marvelous to have you here with us, really, because this is going to be a fun conversation. I originally wanted Beki to come on because she had posted something on Facebook about the flower essences. And I knew of Beki and her work, but I thought, oh my gosh, why haven't we thought to connect with her sooner? Because we have not had anybody to talk about flower essences. Mm-hmm. I'm not familiar with that. Are you guys?
Well, as far as the Bach remedy,
we've heard of it.
Yeah, but I haven't really gotten much deeper.
Very lightly, yeah.
But then in investigating that and looking at her website, there's just so much more about Beki that you guys are going to be fascinated with. But like we do with all of our, were you going to jump in?
No, I'm just like, and everyone should be feeling this energy coming from behind her, because everything, even the flowers, because you've got the painting, behind you, the flowers, the same flowers.
With the lily, yep.
Yeah, and it's just like.
Our set is looking a bit dull at this point in time.
A little drab. Still drab. Still dingy.
Exactly. We'll have her come over and jazz it up a bit, I guess. But Beki, I'm really curious, like we are with all of our guests, we're curious about, here you are now, and you're doing this amazing soul work, tapping into Akashic Records, connecting with people's soul for healing and for service to humanity. But has it always been like that for you? I remember hearing that you had a significant experience at age 17 that we'll get into too. But before that, growing up, was there a religious framework? Did you know your gifts? What was going on back then?
Oh, that's a good question. So I was always fascinated with God or the divine or something. And I grew up, my father was a minister, but he wasn't a practicing minister most of my life. He started dating my mother when my mother is Black and my dad is white. And when they got together, he was actually asked to resign from the church that he was presiding in, just dating. This was, I think this was in Chicago or Ohio. I can't remember which one. But so there was definitely a theological, he was a theologian. He taught at the university in Windsor, Ontario, where I went to university as well. And so there was a more intellectual relationship with God and religion. But I would say for me, the journey was really personal. My relationship with the divine, I would say, if I were one of the ways I would describe myself as a devotee of the divine, I just love it. I love connecting to the divine in all ways and all forms, and the way it lives in all things. So my art was a big part of my journey. And is it okay if I share about that first awakening? Yeah. So when I was 17, I lived in the Bahamas for my high school years. I grew up in Canada up until about age 13, then moved to the Bahamas. And when I was living there, my mother is an artist as well, and she was my art teacher in high school. And I was immersed in the world of art when I was living in the Bahamas. So art was my spirituality mostly, and nature and the beauty. Beauty is my spirituality. And so when I graduated from high school, I moved back up to Canada to go to university there. And I was 16 at the time. My mother moved to Ohio. I went to visit her when I was 17. So that just to give you a framework of the timing. And she asked me to paint a painting without using a reference. And up until then, I always needed to have a picture to work from, or from life. I would take a picture of something from life, and I was very much dependent on that kind of, I guess, crutch for me. I don't think it's a crutch for everybody, but for me, it was a way for me to feel kind of solid and safe. And this time when she asked me to paint without using a reference, I acquiesced, which I didn't before. Anytime she asked me before, I had a lot of resistance. And so she left me in her studio. Her studio was in the kitchen in her apartment. And she said, I'll leave you. You don't have to show me the painting when you're done. I want you to paint purely for the process, not for the end product, which was key. And you don't have to show it to me. So I started painting, and I would say that was one of my first big awakenings. I felt like I made conscious contact with my soul, perhaps for the first time. And I felt liberated. I felt free. I felt like something shifted inside of me. And I knew I never wanted to paint the old way again. And I realized that the old way was for approval. It was a way to feel like I would get that pat on the back. Aren't you good? And so it was one of the ways in which I think I was able to connect to my true self, which was really non-conforming, like didn't want to conform to what was expected of the norm. And so I think it opened the door to that permission, is that you can experience this kind of freedom and creative self-expression without having to fit into any kind of box. So that was a kind of big moment for me. And it was also the way that I was able to open up my voice, because I was pretty shy. And so, as you can tell, my paintings are not shy at all. This really big one over here on the wall I did when I was only 18 years old. So that was not long after I had that awakening. It was like this kind of explosion of color and energy and sensuality and, creation kind of flowed out of me as a result. So that I felt like was a way for me. So as my art is a way to connect to the divine, it was a way for me to connect to my own divine self.
Yeah, when I heard you speak about that at 17, it was just beautiful. You said, if I recall correctly, that your higher self was no longer going to allow you to continue living in fear. And
yes,
it was time to break free from that fear aspect. And we talk so much about that here on the podcast, because it's so
debilitating.
Yes, that was the word. That was the word I wanted. Yeah. It just holds you back, and you can't fulfill this soul contract that we came in here with, whatever that is. So how did your life change once you broke free from that? Obviously, it probably wasn't a night and day thing. You had to take baby steps to break from that free into that.
Well, I will say that I definitely continued to have a lot of different things that created fear in me. So I was not fully free of fear. I definitely had I guess a direct line to my soul. So each time I painted, I felt that freedom, I felt that connection, I felt that liberation. But then I go back into real life, and I would have to deal with all the things that we humans deal with. And I could almost segue right into the flower essences here, because I had a fear of public speaking that was debilitating in ways that disallowed me to feel free to speak in any situation, even with a small group of people. It didn't have to be a big crowd. I was contained by this fear, and I did a lot of work trying to heal that, because I knew I had a lot to say. And it was, I think some people, it's like, well, I just don't need to speak. But I had a lot that I wanted to say, and I kept feeling muzzled by my own fear. And so one of the first remedies of the Bach flower essences, which I will explain what they are in more detail, is it's a Bach flower called Mimulus. I put them right here because there's like a little, it's like a map of healing the different essences. And Mimulus is for fear of the known, fear of something you're very clear about what you're afraid of. And for me, it was the fear of public speaking. That was the focus for me. And after taking this for about probably it took a few months, maybe 6 months before it really started shifting. Someone asked me to do a talk on the flower essences, and I said yes without hesitation. And I knew it had shifted that pattern in me. And I had tried a lot of things before that. So, would you like me to tell you what the flower essences are?
Sure. Yes.
Yes.
Please.
How much did you have to, do you took it every single day, like so many drops every single
I
day?
did. I did. And it's and that, I'll explain that to you after because I've got a lot of remedies that I want to share with you because I love speaking about the flower essences. Uh, what I want to say about the way that the flowers came to me is first of all, when I realized the power of flower essence as a tool for healing and transformation and awakening, I realized that I've been painting the essence of flowers like my whole life. And it was very much organically connected to my art and the way that that evolved as I opened up to kind of the energy of nature and sensuality and the connection between nature and the feminine body in my artwork. I realized later this is a part of the energy of these flower essences. So flower essences, there are many different systems of flower essences, but the Bach flowers are the first kind of westernized packaged flower essence. The indigenous people have been using flower essences for a long time. So it kind of came into a more modern form with Dr. Bach in the early 30s. And you might recognize Rescue Remedy. And if anybody knows a Bach flower, this is the one that they'll know. And then you find out that there's 38 other flower essences in the whole mix of the Bach flower essences. And the way that he discovered it, he started out as a traditional doctor in the UK, emergency room doctor. Eventually, he began to do a more homeopathic kind of model of healing. And he decided that he felt like you could treat one person with the same condition and the other person, and one person would get well and the other person wouldn't. And why is that? He's like, there's got to be a more pure method of healing. And homeopathy is pretty powerful. It is a form of vibrational healing that doesn't have any substance or material matter in it. It's all energy. And it's mostly focused on, a lot of people will focus on the physical conditions when they're treating somebody with homeopathy. And I won't go into that because that's a whole nother thing. But the flower essences they work on the emotional and the mental level, and they are also vibrational medicine. They have no matter in it. There's no herb. There's no, it's the flowers themselves. It's like you're taking the essence of it. The way that you do that is there's different methods, but if you think of the dew on a flower in the morning, that carries the imprint of the soul of that flower, the frequency of that flower.
Well, that
And
makes
then you,
sense of the moto. Like
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
proved.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Emoto, who did the experiments with water. I mean, now we're beginning to understand scientifically the way
Uh-huh.
that works with a lot of different researchers are exploring that. There's Veda Austin's.
Yeah.
Right.
Seven following
Oh,
her stuff. Yeah.
yeah, it's amazing. So the flower essences are really like the soul of the flower that's captured in water. And then the way that they create the essences, they use alcohol to kind of preserve it, to create a preserved mother tincture. And then this would be what's called a stock remedy that comes from the mother tincture. And you can make, with one flower, you could make like a huge amount of bottles of the stock mixture. And then this, when I am making a remedy for somebody, this is like one of my little labels there. I take a 1-ounce bottle, and I blend different flower essences into one bottle, and this is what they take. And you can take this every day. I suggest between 3 and 5 times a day, you just spray it in your mouth. And that just activates that frequency in your system each time you spray it. So it begins to shift the pattern of, I would say, like the discord that keeps you from, or another way is blocks or static. I kind of like static because, we have static or fuzz around us that keep from the clear signal of our natural soul frequency. And so we're just trying to get back to your natural soul frequency. And then the positive expression of the remedy that you're taking will come through. And so it clears the negative expression, like if it's fear of public speaking, and then it moves into that positive expression, which is, confidence and trust and self-awareness and self-expression.
Amazing. It's just amazing because it's all about the energy. And like you said, how many bottles you can make out of one flower, because energy is unlimited.
Mm-hmm. Know that. Like, how did
he figure it out?
Yeah. How did he come to that? Because I'm thinking, here's this British guy, and doesn't he come to Florida or whatever?
I don't know.
Or that's where the Bach, maybe I'm thinking of something.
No, he didn't. I don't think he came to Florida. It took a long time for it to come to the United States. It was mostly in Europe, and it was used in that area more than here, the Bach flowers.
How did he figure out how many uses he could get out of it, and that the energy the frequency.
Do you think he was channeling that information at some, yeah.
Yeah, it was an exploration for one, right? Like, how do you know until you experiment with it? But he was really sensitive. And so like an empath type sensitive, he would go out into nature and he would begin to feel the symptoms that needed to be ameliorated. So it might be deep grief, like just overcome by grief. And then he'd find the flower and he would start working with that flower and it would ameliorate it. And that's how he figured out the remedies. It was a very dynamic and intuitive process of figuring out which ones.
And is that what you do then? Is it when you're blending, is it that intuitive process?
It is. For me, it's a combination of intuitive. So for me, I understand with the Bach flowers, for instance, I have worked with them for so long that I know what the indications are. So like anybody can learn that, it's like, what is mimulus for? Mimulus is for fear of a known, from something known. Whereas there's aspen, which is a remedy that you take for fear of the unknown. You don't really know what you're afraid of, and it might cause anxiety. And you're not quite sure why you're anxious, that kind of fear. There's a lot of fear remedies, and there's different things that cause fear, right? So like what's causing, like worry is a form of fear. Mm-hmm. You're worrying about what's going to happen in the future, like, oh, you're worrying about your loved ones, so that would be a different remedy. So I've learned, I've studied the remedies, and that's how I've kind of, what I do is when I'm working with a client, we're sitting with each other and they're sharing what's going on with them and what's happening. And my intuition will pick up which remedy will be right based on what they say. Mm-hmm. I also work with the Akashic Records, and that gives me a much larger window of information and awareness that I'm able to tap into that they may not be speaking, but I'm hearing from their soul guides, spiritual guides, what's going on with them. And then I'm like, oh, this is the remedy that they need. Or I'll hear the remedy drop in, like the name of the remedy drop in. So that gives me more range than just my intellectual mind.
And that's like anything. If you're reading tarot, you know that, because that's what you do also, but you can learn the cards and what all the cards mean, but it's about releasing from that and allowing the intuitive piece to come in, because it's a much more rich experience that way. And tailored to the particular client and their needs.
Right. Exactly.
But I want to get into this Akashic record piece too, because I'm curious how that works for you in terms of Will being a trance channel. So
Right.
he dips out of the conscious and, speaks, the higher self speaks through him, and then he comes back in. But it sounds like a lot of yours is through conscious types of channeling of the Akashic. When you're doing, though, for example, soul portraits or the soul mantra that you provide light language for your clients or any of those types of things, do you go into a trance-like state when you don't have a client in front of you, for example? Or tell us all about how that works.
Okay. So I've worked with the Akashic Records. Let me see, where do I want to start with that? So I realized once I started working with other people and learned kind of the sacred prayer that takes you into the Akashic field, that I had already been working with that field for a long time. And I had been, when I was 17, was when it first happened. Like I went into the field of my own Akashic record. And so all of my paintings feel like they're coming from that place of that soul frequency of my unique soul's blueprint in my Akashic field. And I was always felt guided, just kind of naturally guided, intuitively guided. I don't go into any kind of trance state where I'm not aware, like in that kind of, it's more of, I'm always self-aware, but I can feel my ego self just kind of step over here, and I'm able to be clearer as it flows through me. Then I started writing kind of a dialogue with the divine. And I realized also that when I was writing, that was another way in which I was in the Akashic field, my Akashic field. So those awarenesses were almost in retrospect. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a very familiar place, and I've been writing for over maybe 25 years, prolific kind of conversations with the divine. I've hundreds of journals of writing. And so my 2 books that I wrote are only like 2 like published books. And I have quite a few blogs on my website, blog writings. So there's only so much that becomes public, but a lot of it is informing the work that I do, and it guides me in my own awakening journey. So, so with the Akashic, the way that I started working with the Akashic Records with other people, that unfolded after the flower essences. So flower essences became my segue into working with people. That was about 12 or so years ago, or maybe more, maybe 15 years ago. And that was because I needed help. Like the flowers came to me because I needed support, and I wanted support. My oldest son was going through a lot of, adolescent angst and drama, and I needed it for me, and I wanted to figure out how to help him. And it started really with a psychic telling me, when I told her what was going on with my son, she said, give him rescue remedy for 2 weeks, day and night, in the morning and at night, and you will notice a difference within 2 weeks. And it was miraculous. Like he shifted, and he was probably 17 or so at that point. And then I later on realized that there was 38 flower essences in the Bach flowers. It's like all these essences, and that, why didn't I know about this? It's like, how did I not know about this? I want everybody to know about this because it's such an accessible tool for transformation. It's like you can go to your health food store, you can figure it out yourself. You don't have to have a practitioner. The practitioner just deepens the process and, kind of supports you in the journey, but you can do it on your own. It's safe. You can take medications while you're taking it. It won't count. There'll be no counterindications. So there's that. So I started like writing a list of all of the people that I wanted to help with the flower essences. Like everybody I knew, oh, this would help this person. This would help this person. It's like, oh my gosh, I was so excited.
How well did they receive that?
Huh?
How well did they receive that? Like you saying, oh,
well, yeah, I had to be, I'm very sensitive. So I was able to, ease it in without seeming judgmental. That's why I think I'm good at what I'm doing, because what I do is that there's the art of that really subtle art of kind of letting somebody know something that might be really hard without scaring them, or um, making them feel like they've done something wrong. So that's, I think, the art of working with the Akashic field as well, because you get a lot of information for your clients and you want to make sure that it's empowering to them. And that's what I notice about the records, is that they really, the messages are always about self-empowerment. And so I was able to begin to do a practice of working with people with the flower essences. And as a result, I already had a healing practice. And then I started to work with another local healer, Franks. And we were doing Akashic Records and Reiki healing. And she was really supportive and ushering, well, actually, my guides through her told me that I was to start offering Akashic Records to my clients. And I had already started working with it. So that's kind of how that segued in. And then my guides through Chris told me that I was to do soul portraits. And that was just so brilliant to me, because this is how your guides are. They're brilliant. They know you so well. I was like, that's the perfect way of combining my love of my art and my creating with this healing work. And it made it all make sense to me when the two came together. So I go into the client's Akashic record. They're not with me when I'm doing this, because I'm tapping into their soul realm, and I call their soul in, and then I channel their soul on canvas.
Wow.
So that's how I do that. So I just kind of get out of the way, because I'm practiced in that. I've been doing that for a long time. And then I receive this kind of transmission, and I give a visual interpretation to that.
That is so beautiful. Thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah, it was a lot.
No, it's
And
so fascinating.
Well, and during that process, during the creative process, is it a one-time exercise? I mean, is the whole canvas filled at that moment, or is it a multi-day process that you're doing this?
It's a multi-day process, because painting just takes time. But I would say that I feel like when I do the first sitting of the painting, I always make sure I have at least like a full day where I won't be interrupted for a full day. And I have a limit of 5 hours that I've given myself. Otherwise, my wrist gets sore. But I can totally go in a zone. I could paint for 8 hours straight and not even notice.
Right.
My kids would say, when you go down into your studio, it's like you're gone. We never see you. So I do that first 5 hours. I feel like I capture the first, like I feel like I get it in that first sitting. And then it begins to just kind of, the other sittings, it could take weeks, it could take a week for me to paint it. It depends.
But each time you get behind the canvas, that soul essence fills you back in, and you're with it. So yes, that's the beauty.
And I go into their Akashic records each time before I begin, so that I know. And I ask my ego to sit. I actually have a place where she sits on a throne in the observation deck.
Right. Well,
you can watch, and we can talk about it later, because she has a lot to say about the paintings.
So you say you sit with the painting again. So do you find that, like, the first go round you're painting a landscape of whatever, and then you're going back retrieving more information, and so then it becomes more defined and more defined?
Yeah, I would say sometimes. So a soul portrait has, a lot of different dimensions to it. It can have sacred geometry. It can be more abstract. It can have a face in it. It can be, I never know what will come out. And sometimes there's layers where I paint over something, and I'm aware that layer is in there, and that's going to still be activating a particular frequency at a subliminal level. Yeah. So there's these layers. And then there's just the practical end of cleaning up a piece of artwork. Like, so that it's really beautiful and you know
I can see the wheels turning. He wants one.
Well, no, well, oh, you know, I'm making myself a note
Easy birthday
I want to get you connected to a group that I'm connected with through you may even know him. He was local for a while. Ian Morris. I don't know if that name sounds
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
He did frequency music.
Yes, yes.
He's putting together a collaborative group of creators, and I would like to get you connected with him and be, get on one of our monthly meetings, or even within the online magazine that he puts together. So, and maybe do something for that.
Yes, I'd love to reconnect with
My
him.
wheels are spinning as far as
Yeah, thank you.
so many people that would love that connection point. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is soul portraits are probably the favorite part of my work when I have an opportunity to like be in that zone. It's so powerful. It's so beautiful to connect to another being's soul. I feel like that when I'm in anyone's Akashic record in my studio too. It's just the feeling of that uh, awareness of just seeing that kind of beauty. Um,
Yeah, it's
Now, are
Amazing.
you doing them as big as the ones behind you, or is there a standard size?
It's up to the client. So like my fee is by the square inch. So it's so that they can decide what budget they want, and what size they want based on, what they can handle. Some people can't handle a huge painting. It feels like too much.
Well, energetically too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of energy to bring into your home
Yeah.
or your
I mean,
office.
even a small painting can be like, it's like it can be very intense. So yeah, I mean, I've had a couple clients that have had me do 2 soul portraits. So, 5 years later, they're like, I'm ready to kind of see the evolution of this
Mm,
soul
yeah.
expression. And that's pretty amazing to see how that evolution happens. I myself have painted 3 soul portraits of myself, and each one had symbols I didn't notice because I don't know when I'm painting, I have no idea. I'm not painting from here at all. I'm not using my imagination when I paint.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. The last book that I just wrote is the first time I felt like I really used my imagination. It was, and people are like, really? I'm like, yeah, because imagination to me is something that you start creating in your mind and then you bring it into fruition. And for me, it's very much a divining kind of process where I open up and allow it to flow through me.
I'm curious about, like, have you just stories now, I guess, I don't know, but I'm thinking, have you ever painted something and then given it to the client and just had them all of a sudden like see things about themselves that they never realized? Like, I would just think that would be so incredibly intimate and beautiful and personal.
Yeah, I love that question because when I offer the painting to the client, we do a ceremony. So it's not just here it is. We do an unveiling ceremony. And if they're local, they come over and I have candles and I have music and I set the whole thing up. And it's very intentional that when I offer them the painting, that they're not worrying about like responding to me as the artist, but that the transmission of that soul frequency is direct with them. And so I set that up very clearly, that boundary, and then I just hold space. And one of the most profound, I've had many people, once they see it, they just start weeping. I had one client, she wept for almost 15 minutes before she could speak. And when she did, she turned around and looked at me and she said, "That's me. That is me."
Wow.
And then just cried again, you know? And it was very abstract. Like, it wasn't like this face. It was so powerful. And so that's pretty cool. And there's been some times where people are like, whoa, like that's intense. There's been a few people that had to adjust to it. And then start going deeper into it. So sometimes the image they have to grow into. It leads them to their true self because they're not quite there. Some people just might be curious. I want a soul portrait, but they're not really ready to see their soul, you know?
I find that really
Yes.
funny though. Like I'm sure we've all had those experiences
Oh, yeah.
with clients where, they're just kind of like, well, I'm just sort of interested. Like they're dabbling.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
it's like no longer a joke. Like
They get their socks blown off and they're like, oh,
Yeah.
hello. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. And like it's fascinating to me because some people love art and they like my artwork and they want a soul portrait because, oh, that would be cool. And then they're like, oh, that's my soul. It's like, I didn't expect that. But they're always something a lot of people ask me is it ever like ugly? And I'm like, are you kidding me? It's like,
Right.
there's never a soul that's ugly.
Right.
It's always beautiful and they can appreciate the beauty of it, even if they don't necessarily immediately understand it. They have to drop in. And a lot of art it's like you have to be with it before you receive it. A lot of people just can't see it and feel it on the first.
Yeah.
Right.
Like if you're in a gallery, you may not really fully receive the transmission of the artist's work.
Another thing that occurred to me, sorry, I got lots of questions here.
Yeah, please.
I know nothing of this person, and now all of a sudden it's, have you ever had people commission you to, or whatever your phraseology is, to do soul portraits for either like miscarriages or children who go, who pass over early, or even animals, pets? I just figure, oh my God, like that almost brings me to tears, just the idea of having that energy with you the rest of your life like that.
Yeah.
Yes, I have not had the opportunity to paint somebody who's already transitioned, except, oh, I take that back. I painted my father after he transitioned.
So how was
So
it?
that was that's the only time I did that. And actually, I also did a soul portrait of Jesus, which I love. It's one of my favorites. So I have had that experience, but I think those were those were me choosing to do that. So for a client, I would love to do that. I think that would be so beautiful. I have done an animal. I had one client ask me to do a soul portrait of her horse.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, wow, I wonder what will come through. I'm like, that's fascinating. So when I started painting it, I started seeing a horse's head show up. And I assumed it would be completely abstract. I didn't expect any physical, because I've done a lot that it shows up more abstract. And and I could hear the horse say to me, I love my horse body. I want it represented with my soul.
How cute.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So you can see on my website, there's a soul portrait tab. So you can kind of go in and see different soul portraits that I've done on there to get a feeling for it.
It wasn't a question. I just wanted to go back to what you were saying about connecting. No, you're fine. When you're connecting with their soul and going into that Akashic record, it's, there is no other divine place than that. I mean, it's when we do our work with, working with clients in their higher selves or their souls, it's, there are, it doesn't happen frequently, but there are times that I come out of my trance session where I just fall into this overwhelmed place of divine love, and I start weeping, and it's not that I'm sad for anything. It's just I'm overwhelmed by the pureness of that soul, that essence, and it's a really marvelous place to be at. And so so when you were talking about that, it was just flashing back in my head of all these different channels and connecting with people's higher selves and stuff. So
It's funny because I don't get that as much like with people because I'm not connecting with that level.
Right.
But and I do
the animals.
some mediumship.
Yeah.
But when I do animals, and especially, I'm not really a dog person, but when I connect with dogs, does me in every time. I'm so unprofessional sobbing. it's ridiculous because it's just pure love.
Yeah.
So when you're doing your mediumship and you feel a dog come in, is that
that part is just
Yeah.
right. And the thing is, they never leave the people. They stay by their side. They're just like, whereas cats are typical cats. Like they're just like, yeah, I'm going to make sure they're doing well, and then I'm going to transition. To me, they're very matter of fact. Whereas the dogs are just like, so
I love
I wondered
that.
about doing a soul painting of a dog, like what that would be like for
I
you.
know, that it's bringing back the memory of when I did do the horse, how I wept and wept. I'm remembering that now because I felt this unconditional love it's so different from human.
Yes.
It is. It really is.
Because we've been really trained into a more conditional love, which is a part of the human experience. But moving into that space, I remember it's just like I couldn't start painting. When I first went into the records, it took me a while to start the painting. Yeah, that's a beautiful memory.
Which is strange because, the soul's just as a human soul's, pure as well.
Right. But it's still different.
It's just next level kind
So-
of, I don't know, the small bundle of just joy,
Pureness.
and love, and
Yeah.
Well, I also think, don't you think that we're tapping into, when we're going into the soul record, we're going into, I think of it as like the embodied soul, that particular part of the large soul. So there's the oversoul, then there's the embodied soul that's Beki.
Yeah.
And so I'm tapping into all these different aspects of these different lives that Beki's lived. And so there's still that embodied aspect when you're tapping into that record, or I'm not sure at the mediumship level. And so it's different from the animals, and you're going into the soul of that animal, but there's still another layer of our soul that is all of it. That's the unconditional,
Well, and
absolute unconditional.
I'm sorry. And I have had that happen twice where a soul, like I was doing a handwritten, typed up this thing for somebody, and all of a sudden they just allowed me to see their soul. Like, I mean, like this greater, that had me in tears because it was all of a sudden just like, I'm going to show you the full essence. And it just floored me. So, and that's only ever happened twice, but otherwise it's just the aspect of the people, which, it's just the aspect of the people, it's like, they're special. They just do you in. There's a reason.
Yeah. I would say that every time I enter into someone's Akashic record, I will initially kind of get an imprint of their soul, like an energy kind of awareness of their soul's essence. And it is always moving to me. So for the first time, especially, it's like I'm getting acquainted with that energy, and I'm always like, whew. And then I start going into all the details and the kind of things that they want to be supported in, to be aligned to that soul energy. So I have noticed that trend, that thread.
This might sound like an odd question, but there are researchers, maybe psychonauts we can call them, who have tried to, knots, like astronauts,
Yes,
not
I'm
nuts,
Yeah, I get it. I like that.
have tried to map out the astral realm in astral traveling and remote viewing and that sort of thing. And apparently there are different layers and levels and rooms and things like that. Do you find that to be the case because we work in the quantum field, we call it the quantum field, and technically it's kind of the same thing as the Akashic record. I think the quantum field probably encompasses everything other than just the Akashic record and the human realm. But do you find that to be the case when you were learning about it, or when you work within it, that you navigate it in a certain way?
I feel like for me, so my clairs are mostly clairsentience and claircognizant. So it's not as visual. And my guides eventually let me know why, because I was like, why am I not getting more visual? And it's because of the work that I do. It would get in the way of me getting out of the way when I'm doing visual work.
Yes.
So I'm more sensitive, like I'll feel in my body. I'll get messages through my body or through this kind of dropping in of knowing. That's just like, oh, there it is. That's the information. So I don't have this kind of experience of moving through space or time. There's very little visual. And if I get a visual, it will be like, the other day I had a puppy, since we're talking about dogs. It was like I had a puppy come in and offer a message.
Oh,
And so it was like I saw it and it flashed in and out, and then I got the message. So the claircognizant comes in. So that's how that's my relationship with the Akashic field. And for a long time, I felt like clairvoyance was the only thing, not the beginning of I mean, I began to learn that pretty quickly with the Akashic Records, but I think that's what we focus on when we think of psychic,
Right.
being able to access that realm, another realm. And so I've had to, the flower essences actually have helped me to really trust what I know. There's a remedy called Serato, and Serato is for that sense of being connected to your intuition and following it and really trusting what you're receiving. So Serato actually worked with me for when I really started working in the Akashic Records. That was always in my mix, was to work with that.
that's awesome.
That
Now,
is.
you said your mom was an artist. She was an art teacher and your first teacher, really, I guess. Is she still living?
She is. She's here in Charleston. She's known here as she does portrait therapy, and she paints outer space now.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
We
Well,
might
She
need to.
paints huge outer space paintings, and then she'll often put a portrait, like combine someone's face, because she's a portrait artist. I'm a soul portrait artist, not a portrait artist. So I always said when she was doing portraits, I'm like, I will never paint portraits because everybody wants my nose is too big, can you take that wrinkle out or whatever? And I'm like, I learned long ago that I can't paint to please people. I need to paint to connect to the divine. So it's kind of ironic that later on I started doing soul portraits, and she does portrait therapy. So she'll work with people, sometimes in a portrait where they sit with her. It'll be in person, and they'll start kind of talking about what's showing up in the portrait, how their own physical reflection is reflecting their emotional and psychological journey.
Well, I
Spiritual.
ask because we know as creative people, the best way to interact with the divine is through this creative process because we are creative beings. And so when you're tapping into that flow state, that intuitive state. And so I wonder, since your mom also is so creative, is she quite woo-woo or is she into all of this sort of thing as well? How does she express?
My mother, I sometimes call her my mother, my soulmate, and my husband's my earth mate.
Okay, yeah.
I've been married 39 years, and so as of a couple days ago. So we just are amazing partners. And my mother and I speak the same language, the same soul language. And the fact that we're both painters kind of gives us that extra, dance to have with each other, of supporting each other and in this journey. Her name is Elena Shakur.
Shakur.
Yeah.
Look her up too. That sounds
Right.
neat.
Yeah, she's harder. She's 86. She's almost 87. And so she doesn't do any of the social media and all that stuff. She had a website for a while, but she's an amazing artist. Yeah.
Does she have some of her work at any of the galleries downtown, or?
No, she does mostly commissioned work. So she's in a lot of the homes in Charleston.
Oh, that's so
Okay.
cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. She's in people's homes because they're portraits, right? It's like portraits are commissions.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, most of them. But she has her own kind of gallery in her house of her outer space paintings.
That's
Is she into galactic stuff or is that just sort of?
It just kind of evolved where she opened up into this. She found pictures on the Hubble and she started painting them, and she was just like, it just became her thing. And it's almost like her work becomes abstract, even though it is literally outer space, exactly the way she sees it.
wow.
That is
Yeah.
neat.
That is neat. We might have to have her as a guest.
I was
You're
gonna
very
say,
lucky to have
It's
that
powerful. Yeah.
mention from like just the way that she initially just said, here, do this from your heart. Because I'm thinking you were what, 17 when she did that? And I'm thinking,
And when she kind of guided me in that, yes, I was 17.
and I'm thinking most 17-year-old girls, if you know, the mom and the daughter are having a conversation,
Yeah.
you know, it's like, why are you wearing those clothes? You know,
Right.
like,
Yeah. That was not our conversation. We were very esoteric.
That's neat.
oh my God, that's so cool.
Yeah.
You were on your website. I saw there's a 6-minute video. It's kind of like a TED Talk, but it was local to Charleston.
Yeah. It's Pecha Kucha, which is another kind of, talk that they do around.
Your flower essence were working because you did a fantastic job. You were an eloquent, beautiful speaker.
Thank you.
One of the things that you said that I had to quote, and I wanted to ask you to talk about to our audience, my pain delivers me to my freedom. Talk about that and how through these setbacks that we all have, or these dark nights of the soul, we can continue to have an open heart.
Yes, that's a great question. So when I wrote my first book, Bare Beauty, My Journey of Awakening, I was inspired by my divine guidance to go back in my life and to retrace the points of awakening in my life where I had an experience where I felt this opening and this awakening. And what I noticed as I did that is that each awakening was preceded by a contraction, by some kind of painful contraction. We think of contractions as painful, but when I use the word contraction, it feels productive. It feels kinder. It feels like the pain itself is something that will give birth to something new. And so I used that analogy in my book as a way to kind of express that dance of movement from pain, from the conditions of life, struggle, and then what that gives birth to. So I guess that's the best way to describe that. And I had, like most people, being human can be very challenging, and life conditions come our way. And what I will say is that the power of going back and retracing those in the way that I did, it helped me to stay focused on what it gave birth to rather than focused on the contraction and the pain that brought me to that next level. And so about halfway through the book, I thought I was done. I thought the book was going to be a quick little short little book. It ended up being 300 pages.
Wow.
But halfway through the book, it's a spiritual memoir, I would call it. I was kind of put back into the writing again. And it was when the Emmanuel Church, when the 9 parishioners were murdered. And it just it rocked me. And I went into a whole new contraction. And it opened up the door to a lot more writing. And then I had contraction after contraction that followed. And it's almost like I went from the first part of the book is going back and retracing. And then the second half is real time of the experiences that were in part of that awakening journey. So that I started that book in 2015, at the beginning of 2015, and I was done at the end of 2015. And then it took another 2.5 years to edit and all of that laborious stuff to get the book out, which was not easy but writing for me is very organic and very easy, and it flows like a river. That's the easy part. It was the kind of making it presentable in a way.
That's with Allison. She's
you have a lot of books.
Yeah.
The writing is the easiest part. The editing stinks. It's not easy.
So
but that was beautiful. I like that metaphor of the contraction because it makes it productive.
Yeah.
What's so interesting is that in a lot of our higher self channelings, the higher self is always telling or advising the client to go back and like you said, retrace some of those highlights, but look at it from your divine, not from the struggle of the human, because you're going to look at those arguments or those setbacks or whatever it was from the human and relive it that way. But they want you to see the divine beauty in it and the lesson and the learning and where it led you, and never to regret any of that, because you're here, sitting here having a reading, or you're sitting here, whatever you're doing, purposefully. And it
Exactly.
aligned that way because of all of the things that happened. So that's such beautiful advice for anybody to go back and look at your life and see how divinely inspired it really was.
Yeah.
All of these disparate pieces that seem like they don't, like for mine, being in the army and just all these different things that don't seem to make sense. And they all aligned to form this beautiful jigsaw puzzle.
Right.
Exactly.
Pieces that fit together so that we can do what we're doing right now.
Yes. Yeah.
A cake is nothing but a bunch of disparate pieces on a shelf until you mix them correctly, and then they turn out into this beautiful thing. That's what our life is. We're just disparate pieces that are just separated, and we all come together, and we form this life. There's challenges along the way, but that's what makes that life so special.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we carry that on to the next and to the next, and obviously I didn't give birth to children, but those that have, we have two children of our own, and it is kind of like you forget about it. You forget about the pain of that because you have the joy of what it produced.
Right.
Oh, I can do another one, and then
I know. And that's what women say. I mean, how do we decide to get pregnant again and again? Like it's kind of insane, that we can forget that pain enough to be able to like go through that journey again. And we keep doing that as I think as in lifetimes, that's a good analogy for that as well. Like we keep coming back because it's such a rich journey to be human and to have all of these experiences and this incredible adventure. And then other times you sit there and it's like, oh my gosh, why would I decide to do this again? This is so hard.
Right.
Yeah.
You realize that the pain has value
Yeah.
or meaning, then I think it's a lot more bearable.
I think so.
a lot of
too.
times we focus too much on that pain, and it takes us into a spiral, and that's where that fear bubble settles in, and that's where we get captured into our own thoughts, and sometimes we can't release from that, and then that's truly when we need to be reaching out to someone. We need to be leaning on someone. We need to be, pulling in that practitioner to help us see the bigger perspectives, just so we can kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel, if it were, and make our way back to that point. So
And we need our Bach remedy at that
we
point.
do. We do.
Yeah, the Bach remedies really helped me through some of those contractions, I'll tell you.
So you have at least one son. How many children?
I have 3 sons.
Oh, wow.
And
They're now ages 22, 27, and 31.
are they following in your footsteps? Are they woo-woo? What is that?
They're all just uniquely themselves, very different, very different. My middle one is the artist, and they all are creative in their own way. But the middle one actually does like visual art, animation art. And yeah, the youngest is graduating from biomedical engineering at USC. So he's super left brain. And the oldest has traveled the world and loves languages and speaks several languages, like just dives into that. So they're so uniquely different.
Love it. I love
I call them my little gurus. Well, they're not little anymore, but I have a chapter about them in my first book, and it's the little gurus. And they're part of that journey, and the contractions, the expansions, the whole dance of what it means. Mothering, I think, has been one of the most intense and growthful, challenging and satisfying part of my journey.
Absolutely.
It's definitely been a trip.
A lot of your work can be done online, correct?
Yes, a lot of it's online. Probably half of my clients are online now, and because it's energy healing, we don't need to necessarily be physically together. I do Reiki as well. So that also can be distance healing. That's the light language is very much integrated into whatever comes through during the session. It could be just light language. It could be with the Reiki. It can be, I'm usually in the Akashic field. So all of this is like this organic kind of blending of these modalities. And I'm open. I'm just open to spirit. If you have something else for me, I'm here for it. I might resist a little bit initially, but
Right, right.
the light language, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, what is this? What is this?
Exactly.
I'm like, this is a little bit too out there. Can I just keep this to myself? And then I started having muffled ears for like 5 months. And they were like, you got to let this out. And so I'll tell you this, that this is Bare Beauty. Show you that book right there. That's my first. This one, I'm very excited about this one. This is the one that I just published in 2024. So like 6 months ago. That's the book. Threading of the Soul was the way that I was able to integrate the light language frequencies and to really like allow them to come through me. So the whole book is sprinkled with the light language as the story of my parallel self in another dimension. Shahalaku is her name, and she's a priestess, and her world is like a utopian world, and she begins to become aware of me, and as a result, supporting me in this dimension. And then we become aware of each other. And there's this kind of unexpected relationship between the two that occurs. But she speaks the light language of wholeness and creation. And so as a result, the transmission of this book has been something I've been anchoring in as a way to be able to really live into what it means to live from that perspective of wholeness and creation, remembering that we are creator beings and that I am creating my reality. I'm creating my life experience, and all is a reflection of that in my experience, and that all is whole already. So it's informing me in a new way. And with the times that we're in, it's like so powerful. It's calling me to the plate. It's like, this is 24/7. Hold this frequency. Don't get distracted by the chaos. Yeah. Don't get lost in all of that fear and all that energy that's kind of swirling. And I feel like my whole life, with the support of the flowers and all the people and beautiful people along the way that have supported me, that I've prepared me for this. And that this book is just kind of another anchoring. I'm not talking about the contractions anymore. I'm like focusing on what am I creating? How do I create? So it's like the next step. So it feels like it's the next step for me.
That's awesome. And can people purchase those through Amazon as well as on your site?
Yes.
Thank you. Well, all of your contact information, beckyart.com, will be in the show notes below. And we're so thankful that you chose to join us today and spend time with us. It's been such a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed everything that you've shared as well, and look forward to getting to know you all better.
Thank you. And thanks to our audience. Go ahead and hit that thumbs up and the notification bell and share this video far and wide. Thank you for spending time with us on Out on a Limb podcast. Until next time.
See y'all.
See you later.
Take care. Thank you.